Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all throughout the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have another amazing guest. He is, I'm going to say I get this right, he is a lead at Polkadot Capital Group and oversees finance for Parity. His name is Dave Sedacca. Dave, welcome to the show.
Really excited to be here and heard some great things and can't wait to dive in.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here. I'm looking forward to talking to you today. This is going to be great. So let me kick off things first with the first question I ask everybody. It's easy. It's what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, so background has primarily been in strategic finance roles across the gambit from global institutions like BlackRock, worked at startups such as kayak.com and Casper Sleep, really thinking about things from running a business, right? How do you think about profitability? How do you think about unit economics? And how do you think outside the box on scaling different sectors throughout my career?
So you would say it's logical.
Yeah, I'd say it's logical.
Yeah, I think so. So Polkadot is a name that we've heard in the industry for a long time. Maybe it hasn't gotten the love that it should. So I want to find out, most listeners should be why most people should be aware of Polkadot, the dot token, but also ask, you for a good synopsis of your ecosystem, how everything works, and how you fit among that ecosystem.
Yeah, of course. I've been within the Polkadot ecosystem for a little over 3.5 years now, overseeing finance and treasury for Parity, which is the labs company, have built Polkadot from the ground up, from the white paper all the way to where we are today, Polkadot 2.0. And I think, Polkadot has really been a unique player in the industry, coming from Gavin Wood, who was the co-founder of Ethereum, wrote the Solidity smart contract language, and also constructed the Ethereum virtual machine. So naturally, when someone like that comes over and says, I want to go and build Polkadot, why is that, right? And I think what he did was he's solving what Ethereum could not. And I think that's around scalability, creating a modular ecosystem where all these businesses can share security. They have a toolkit in order how to build their blockchain. And, Parity Technologies created a kit called Substrate, and it's used widely across many different blockchain ecosystems because it is that great. And I think Polkadot has had a stigma over the past few years. It was one of the first, I'd say, L0, L1s to launch, and back in 2020. And I think when you're at the forefront of certain innovations, you try different things. You try and push the boundaries, and they did just that. And we had a model where businesses come and deploy on Polkadot, but it came with high barriers to entry and high cost, right? And sometimes that's great for the start, but does it scale, and is it longevity? Does it allow people to easily come and build and deploy in your ecosystem? And that wasn't the case, but we did solve the hard problems first. Ethereum is known as, I'm sure you're aware, it's a DeFi ecosystem. You can come plug and play smart contract and deploy, and that's where a lot of the capital market is today. But what Gavin did is he wanted to, actually build a scalable infrastructure for businesses to create business logic at the chain level. Scale businesses to tens of millions of transactions, have shared security, and have these toolkits ready to build. And I think we've been able to achieve that with many businesses deploying on Polkadot today, and we have roughly about 50 million transactions a month, which it's a quiet beast, but. And this is done without even a very massive DeFi ecosystem.
So I want to get into, first of all, I've heard a lot about Substrate. I want to find out how it works exactly, because I hear this word and I'm like, okay, well, I pretend to know what it does and how it works, but I don't. If you could please let me know, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can simplify, right? So if you think about Shopify today, how you have the toolkit to build a website, you can go in the back end and plug and play. It does just that for you. You're not creating every single layer of code from the ground up when you're building a blockchain at the start. So it's built in Rust, which is a very strong coding language, but it also has its high barriers to entry because your everyday coder coming from a Web 2 SaaS company isn't coding in Rust today. But I think as you see, it's evolved over time. I think with all the resources that you have and the actual resilience of that coding language, it allows for people to actually code their blockchains.
Got it. So then you said that's why you're scaling at the chain level. So when I see Ethereum, I see Tom Lee out there,
Mhm.
talking about his vast expense, but he's not scaling. He's scaling the treasury company, but he's not scaling the chain, right?
Yeah.
So why is your approach better?
Yeah, I think you have to go back into why was blockchain created in the first place? What problems are we trying to solve, and who are we trying to solve them for? I think about centralization on how everything is done today. Those independent actors, those one points of failure, and we're starting to potentially see some of that today, where you're getting a lot of fragmentation and people just creating their own L1 blockchains and having full control. But that's not the vision of kind of Polkadot. Polkadot is here to build an economy for people to kind of scale, share these resources, have native interoperability, own your own data, and make sure you have that sovereignty to understand what this blockchain infrastructure and technology allows for you to do for the long term.
Got it. So so Polkadot Capital Group had a genesis, right? It's separate from Polkadot Chain, right? So what was the genesis of the Polkadot Capital Group like? What's your mandate?
Yeah, of course. It started from me being within the ecosystem for some time now and leading finance and treasury for a labs company to make sure that we're a resilient long-term entity to be able to support growth and build and just bring a little more rigor, right? Based on my background, being at late stage startups and others, really understanding how do you plan, how do you organize, how do you think about strategy at that level. But it was an inflection point earlier this year with not only getting our business to a nice scalable position, but also the U.S. regulatory clarity coming into the footing here. And me based in New York and seeing where Polkadot hasn't really had a massive presence in North America. And I think this is the perfect time where we're seeing this inflection point that I can expand the value that I can add to the ecosystem beyond just operating our labs company, right? Having this background and be able to scale up the division, and that's what Polkadot Capital Group is here to do. It's a division within the ecosystem to ensure that we can educate, we can provide actionable data to institutions and others out there, enterprise level, on how they can operate clearly and confidently within not only Polkadot but just in the broader crypto digital asset space. So it's making sure that we can communicate how what we're here to do. What's the differentiation between, a digital gold Bitcoin, right? And you move down to Ethereum, and then, we have the SEC clearance that just happened last week with the general listing framework for crypto, exchange traded products. You're now going to have 10, 15 of these listings. So, but as an investor or wanting to understand what the future of technology is, how do I think about all these? How do I think about DOT? And it takes it back to the underlying infrastructure on why I see we're differentiated.
Got it. So I interviewed a woman, I think it's back in March, and she was recently brought in Polkadot to run the ambassador program and ambassadors and developers. And it's been a half a year, so I want to find out if you know how you've been successful with that program so far, and have you seen more developers enter the space and more partnerships, and how that's growing and going.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing progress. And, most recently, Gavin Wood, took a few years off from being the CEO of Parity to lead the strategy. And he's now back. And this was just a few weeks ago. And we're taking a fresh look at everything. We're moving from, this ambassador program, we're evolving it. We're making sure we're understanding where are the gaps, where are the pros and cons to how we operated, and now taking a much more product-centric approach to what we're doing for the ecosystem to make sure we can bring real adoption to the masses of people with products that we can understand and show the value of being on a blockchain, right? So the ambassadors are a great extension of what we do at Parity Technologies, what we do as a whole in the ecosystem, make sure that we're just multiplying that voice on what we're doing globally for everyone.
Got it. So comparing again, comparing. I don't want to keep comparing you to Tom Lee, but I want to compare you to his treasury companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their primary purpose is to hold, a massive amount of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever else, and your focus is on products. So, what are some product innovations that you think should be here today or should be coming soon? Will be coming soon, and why that will be important to set you apart from some of the other, L1s.
Yeah, of course. And I think, Polkadot Capital Group does have our position on from the education standpoint, but also talking to how do other institutions access the ecosystem, right? We talked about, okay, you have DATs, you have ETFs, but there's other vehicles where you want to provide that optionality where you just don't have to have a wallet with a seed phrase. You might want to talk to an asset manager and think about, you have a Bitcoin share class or an ETH share class. What about a DOT share class? How do you think about providing that optionality to people for institutions to access, right? And I think that's the point where we focus on there. But I think from the Parity side, and I think about product, it's around scale, right? So in our ecosystem, we believe in a whole gambit of operating in the Polkadot cloud, and that goes from deep in and AI. So Peak, a lot of people probably familiar with them. They build on Polkadot. It's a machine economy. We think about storage, and we have a company called Accurist. They're essentially decentralizing compute with cell phones. They have over 130,000 cell phones already operating and supporting this kind of decentralized infrastructure. Companies like Origin Trail that are helping support with decentralized knowledge graphs, and they're working with the Swiss railway system to really validate all this information in a decentralized way, and you're not dealing with hallucinations of a chat GPT bot. But I think more so, within Parity now, with Gavin's focus, is to start to make products that we see there's some gaps, right? That could be social media type platforms, it could be messaging, it could be HackMD or some other platforms. But what's really fun is going to be us incubating these together as a company, doing product research, and actually building out the next level of consumer application facing products that people can use and love.
It sounds exciting to me. As a retail user, I like several of those concepts. I want to find out, as far as institutional players and investors are concerned, what are they responding to the most positively, and what do you see as the biggest opportunity for them?
Yeah, I think there's obviously the capital efficiency when you're moving things on chain, cost efficiency of using stable coins. I think that's really unique for people. If I move more towards like the payments layer, I still don't think we're there yet. Because if you think about the on and off ramps for people to use stable coins to fiat and you're still using banking partners, I think it's still going to take some time in order to do that. But having that secondary liquidity is going to be very important when we talk about more of the tokenization aspect of things. When you want to tokenize NASDAQ stock or other forms of real world assets, it's going to be really important you have that secondary liquidity to ensure that they're being put to work. Because right now you may see a lot of TVL on chain, total value locked on chain of assets, but are they really moving? Are they really being used at their full potential? Can I collateralize against them and then deploy it into separate pools to generate additional yield on that asset? So I think it's really going to be important as we scale up, and we're not there yet on that secondary liquidity to ensure that we can really put these assets to work. Because looking on, if you go to rwa.xyz, you'll see the metrics on RWAs today, they're roughly 30 billion, right? If we think of that as the total aggregate of the financial markets, we're talking hundreds of trillions, right? So I still think we are, I'd say next 3 to 5 years, I can see that moving from 30 to a trillion, without a doubt. And that's why we can actually put all these assets to work, and institutions will really start to kind of see the value proposition beyond that.
I think I'm going to agree with you in the secondary. Like, we're not nowhere near our full capabilities yet. I would love to see us there, very soon, but what's it going to take? What do you think it's going to take to be able to get over that, to go from that 30 million to that 1 trillion?
Yeah, I think there's definitely fragmentation across different ecosystems. That's going to play a role in it. Obviously, regulatory clarity. And I don't think, if I think about global harmonization of how people operate on each of these different L1s, or how they think about tokenized their assets in different places, you're never going to have, I don't think, that global harmonized framework across the board in every country, right? And we don't see that today in capital markets, but I think the underlying principles of making sure that we're managing risk, compliance, custody, right? How are you building those rules of compliance into smart contracts? Are you using different policies like, ERC 3643 to think about compliance engines within all these assets? Because until you can actually really start to pressure test all of these things working at scale, it's going to be really hard to get the masses to move over. And it's, even if I think about, registered investment advisors, we talk to them as well. What do you think about how, and a lot of people are moving from just traditional finance into digital. If you think about the transfer of wealth over the next, decade or so, people will be more on chain. They will want to understand, how can I transfer my wealth and have an advisor support me? I don't want to manage the keys, but I want people to do that. So partnering with them to think about what wallets to use. How do you navigate DeFi? Let's do some testing. Do we want to just look at, okay, stablecoin collateral and getting yield on my stablecoins, right? Starting really basic, and then you can evolve into much more robust solutions on chain. But all these things are going to take, the education, making sure the infrastructure is pressure tested, the regulatory clearance, and more just principles globally that I think that everyone can adopt and align on, so that we're on kind of somewhat of a common footing.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to take work, but it's taken a lot of work so far, and we're going to continue to work for it. So I agree.
Yeah.
There are some, like, I've been paying attention to the market. I was going to ask you more. Actually, I will ask you a market question. We
Yeah.
had several days of pullback. I'd say we're about 20% down this past week. And people lost, billions of dollars because they tried to leverage the market, try to make leverage trades or whatever. I want to find out, and people still think crypto is only this get rich quick scheme game. I want to find out, what some of the challenges are in debunking some of these myths, like it's get rich quick, and about the crypto itself, and then about the underlying technology, like it's scary or something. What
Yeah.
do challenges need to be overcome?
Yeah, I think the get rich quick. I think we saw that in the 2017, 2018. You're seeing 1,000% up every single day, and you'll hear stories about that today. And you're going to get retail to FOMO into these assets and leverage things. But some of the times you have to hit rock bottom to really understand when you've got to kind of take a little bit more of a proactive approach and think about risk mitigation and making sure you're covered for the long term. And we're always gonna see that. You see it today in the markets. So I don't think that's gonna change. You're always gonna have actors there. But in order to do that, we are starting to see some stability in assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. That volatility isn't as significant as it was years ago, right? I do believe that will start to trickle down as the ecosystems and protocols get more mature. And I think something like, a Polkadot, we're doing some different things on tokenization, right? As you think about removing maybe inflation, you have cap supply on some protocols potentially, that will create some natural, I think, stability in the market. So as we see people evolve and kind of get an understanding of what these assets really mean, and see as a holding in a long-term vision, like that will, I think, bring some stability. And I think from an infrastructure standpoint, from all these blockchain protocols, you'll see, and we talked about it briefly around, tokenization. A lot of different protocols are tokenizing assets. But again, what is the actual scalability of these protocols to go above and beyond that? Are these protocols secure? Are they, do they have a fast, execution and finality? Right. So there's so many different underlying metrics that really matter for a blockchain to scale. And, the reason why, someone like Polkadot has been building the underlying technology for 10 years now, it's because it's not easy. And I think if you see some of the companies today that just want to spin up an L1 blockchain, it's not a walk in the park. And I think you have to really take a step back and look at it, even in today's world, right? And if you're a company and you're great at selling a product, right? Will you naturally just go into manufacturing because you want to verticalize and have everything under one umbrella? I feel like you stick to what you're best at. And I think that's where you're going to start to see protocols thrive and moving away, maybe just solely these fragmented ones, but moving to, say, a Polkadot, right? Understanding what the native interoperability means, understanding what scale and shared security means to protect as the business grows.
Yeah, I see some RWA tokenization on platforms that have never done it before or not meant for it, right?
Yeah.
How is your approach to RWAs going to be a very good lasting approach to RWAs for the future?
Yeah, and I think this kind of comes down into, we think about those earlier barriers to entry for Polkadot. We created this modular platform where you can come and build your own blockchain, but everyone doesn't need to go and build their own full blockchain. Case in point, we were just talking about. So what we're rolling out, and this is kind of like a teaser coming into Q4, is it's going to be it's called Polkadot Hub, and this is going to be our shared liquidity layer of Polkadot, where we'll have 100% EVM compatibility, and we'll have a full DeFi stack built from the oracles to the Lendbaro platforms to the dexes to further tokenization engines built into that with the custodians, and working a lot with our partners in the ecosystem, Velocity Labs, working on the core infrastructure, thinking about DeFi Builder program, and then working with our BD arms like Magenta Labs to find out and get projects that want to come and plug and play. Think about the future of, it isn't just the today smart contract, right? Anyone can, you can spin up a smart contract, but it's around all the metrics around it that make sure that they'll be resilient for the next 5 to 10 years. And I think being able to partner not only the low-hanging fruit smart contract compatibility, but all those other metrics to scale, I think is going to be very crucial. And that's where I see Polkadot Hub being that entryway for people. And then having the ability to then stay within the ecosystem and scale up and build your own L1 blockchain within that same ecosystem, right? Pretty seamlessly.
So when you mentioned metrics a few times, when I think of like proof of work metrics, I think of hash rate, stuff like that. When I think of DeFi metrics, I'm like, I don't really like what are some of those key metrics that we should be looking at to see if the health is if there's a healthy ecosystem there for DeFi. What are some of those metrics?
Yeah, I think finality is very important. You'll see a lot of change. Think about execution, and they say, okay, high frequency trading, 400 millisecond execution times. That's great now, but I think really from a finality standpoint, some of these you'll see the finality, it takes 30 minutes or so, right? And I think that's not great. Everyone's just worried about, okay, it's just executed, but really I think you have to start thinking about the finality of these. And if you think about Polkadot, we have block times and finality of 12, 16 seconds, right? And that's just going to get better over time as we scale up. I think about the still security, right? How decentralized are these blockchains, and who has central control? Essentially, how many independent actors can take over that chain? And I do think it's still not at the forefront and maybe not as important today, but you're starting to see a lot of people shifting towards, all right, we want to be more decentralized. We want to make sure that, hey, there's not 10 independent actors that can take over the network, right? And if I think about that, it's called the Nakamoto coefficient, and that's where Polkadot is the most secure out there. We have I think it's around 170 is the Nakamoto coefficient, which means you need 170 independent actors to try and take over the network, right? Which is magnitudes larger than any other chain out there.
We saw a takeover recently. I think it was Monero. I might be wrong, but it was like they were taken over by a company that took over. How could that be prevented? And what lessons have you learned from that, or any?
So I didn't go into the details, so I can't speak directly into that instance. But like I said, from this metric, this Nakamoto coefficient, we know that from a validator set perspective and how decentralized the ecosystem is, we can understand what that metric is and act fast, right? We understand, okay, if there's a sudden drop, we know that, okay, there's some potential risk to the ecosystem.
That makes sense. Yeah. I'm always concerned if I'm buying something and it's going to go away, So as far as you mentioned, you have a teaser come up, for Q4, the hub, how do you see this industry playing out in the next year? How do you see DeFi playing out in the next year with all the institutional involvement and everything that's going on right now? What is your forecast for the next year?
Yeah, I think it's going to evolve. I mean, dramatically. Today, I mean, even if you go a couple of years ago, people weren't really moving on chain. Tokenization wasn't as vibrant. The lending and borrow market on chain has just been growing exponentially. So I do see this just to continue ramping up. I couldn't put a dollar figure on it, but like I said before, from an RWA perspective, I could see that hitting $1 trillion in the next 3 to 5 years. But DeFi ecosystem, like I said, I think before, is, do you have the infrastructure and the toolkit to ensure that people can easily access your DeFi ecosystem? What wallet are you using? How are you lowering these barriers for people to enter and make sure that it is a seamless experience? And I think that's going to be very crucial for each of these ecosystems. And some are doing it really well today. Others, you have to work on it, right? And I think that's something where, as you continue to evolve with any technology, you're going to learn and kind of be able to improve it over time.
Got it. So awesome. So, 2 last questions. One, why should people? I will go back to the first question. Why should people be more aware of Polkadot going forward? That's the first one.
Yeah, of course. Well, Polkadot is a resilient ecosystem. We are the railroad tracks to allowing businesses to kind of build and grow. Gavin's back. We're really kind of moving from a builder's first mentality to product first, and it's resilient. A lot of businesses are really thriving in the ecosystem, like I mentioned earlier today, because it scales and it works, and you have that shared security. So a lot of that, all those pain points of kind of spin up your own L1, it's reduced tremendously by being able to operate in an ecosystem that's fully interoperable. You have this shared security, and you have the native cross-chain messaging, which you don't need any bridges for that, right? And that's where you have a lot of risk there. So I think it's we have a lot of exciting stuff coming. Like I said, the Polkadot Hub coming in Q4, allowing people to kind of just deploy a smart contract and plug and play, and a whole new product suite that'll be in the works. And last but not least, we have Jam. And Jam is Gavin's new relay chain replacement, which essentially is going to orders of magnitude larger in terms of compute, scale, and soon people will be able to code on Polkadot in just C++, right? Native, normal coding languages. You don't need Solidity anymore. It's going to make this much easier just to kind of be able to plug and play in the cloud of Polkadot or in the hub and really run your business.
Awesome. Sounds exciting to me. So, so I want to thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking with you and learning what's going on in Polkadot. I have one last question. How can people find out more information about you, about Parity, about Polkadot? How can they do that?
Yeah, of course. I think best is, on X, you can follow Polkadot Capital Group at Polkadot CG. And then you can also follow Parity at Parity Tech on X, or you can kind of follow us at polkadotcapitalgroup.com with our website. Come in, fill out the form, reach out if you're interested in speaking, and would love to chat.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.